Hey there. I'm Jay. Welcome to my booth. I work a lot in audiobooks, and if you are an audiobook narrator looking for some ideas on how to make your characters different, if you're looking to get into audiobook narration, or if you're just curious how it works behind the scenes, I'm going to talk through how I make all of the different character voices distinct and unique and easily legible from one character to the next. So when I'm determining which voice I'm going to give to certain characters, there are a few things that factor into it. Some are technical reasons, and some are just obvious reasons. And the most obvious of the reasons is how the character is described by the author in the book. I'll go into more detail about that in a second because there's a bunch of ways to break that down. The next thing I'll factor in is a given character's relationship to all the other characters. And I don't mean their personal relationship, but I mean how much time they spend in the book next to each other and sharing scenes or stage time, if you want to put it that way. Because if I want character A to sound distinct and unique from character B, and they spend a lot of time together, I may make different choices than if they only share one scene together. The next thing I try to decide is the sustainability of the voice. Usually, bigger characters that have large roles in the book that show up a lot, are going to have voices that are closer to my natural speaking voice. And that's just a matter of my own physical stamina and my ability to sustain certain voices. For example, I can keep talking like this forever because it's my voice. But if I was going to take this sort of, I don't know, this kind of, that would be very hard for me to do for a 12-hour audiobook. And then the last thing that I'll factor in is if the author has any specific ideas about how a character should sound. Usually they'll have something like an actor in mind that they would cast in the movie of their book, or maybe they had a sort of film character in mind when they were writing. And as a side note, that's a really, really great way to sort of cast your own audiobook as you're going through it, from a narrator's perspective, because being able to conjure up, say, Meryl Streep or Daniel Day-Lewis or Samuel Jackson, you get a very clear idea of each one of those people. And if you took, say, Meryl Streep from Kramer versus Kramer or Daniel Day-Lewis from There Will Be Blood, you get a very specific performance and character idea where they've done a ton of the legwork for you, and you can just conjure that image and performance and make it your own, which helps to make characters more distinct. So now circling back to the character descriptions, there are a few things that I'll look for when I'm reading through the book before I record it, and just take note of to sort of come up with ideas for how a character might sound. The first is any descriptions of their voice, their vocal quality. Um, Next is descriptions of their behavior, how they behave towards others and the world, their word choice and their vocabulary, and then lastly, their background and history. So I wrote a short little blurb here that we can take a look at together. Hello, they mumbled through a southern drawl. From a voice seasoned by thousands of cigarettes came the reply, hello yourself. So in terms of vocal quality, we've got two great clues there. First, for the first character, we know they're going to have a southern drawl. The next thing, the second character, is a heavy smoker. It's a great clue as to a vocal quality. Next, behavior. There are a few things that we can pick up from this passage in particular. One character walks up and says hello, but they're mumbling. So are they shy? Do they not know this person? Are they reluctant to start this conversation for some reason? And then the second character says, hello yourself, which could mean any number of things. It could be that they don't want to be bothered. It could be they hate this person. It could be that they're good friends meeting after a really long time. All of those things will need a little bit more context from the rest of the book, But these are questions that come up, and it's illustrative that from two short sentences, we can get that much information about behavior. The next thing is word choice and vocabulary to break that down a little bit. It helps to give a picture of who a person is when you look at what words they choose to use. So if someone says loquacious versus wordy or talkative as hell, you get different ideas of who might say which of those words, in which circumstances. And the last thing, of course, background and history, who we are, where we come from, both in terms of our heritage and our upbringing and the roads that we traveled to get where we are today. All of those things are huge factors in who we are. And so they're very important to consider when you're sort of constructing a character. Now, with all of those things, while I'm compiling a portfolio and I'm looking at all of this information, their voice, their behavior, word choice, and their backgrounds, I'm taking a sort of clinical observer perspective. I'm not levying any sort of judgment about or of my own biases or my own experience onto these characters because as the performer, it's really important to let the author's words come through and let the characters be who they are and not judge the characters for any choices that they're making, but just to present them as is happening in the story, which is really, really important as well for the listener so that they can draw their own conclusions the way that they want to without you imposing anything because you're the narrator, you're not telling people what to think about the story. So then once I've got all of the components in my little dossier or portfolio for each character in the book that needs to be fleshed out, I'll move to making that voice distinct from the others. Um, and the way I think about this is I sort of take the character, plug it into a mixer that has all these different sliders that I'll then adjust to make them unique and distinct. The first thing that's a really easy way to switch up characters is, of course, accents. If you're good at them and the book allows for it, it's a great way to make characters distinct. For example, if a character is British versus American versus Russian or Eastern European or something, each of those three characters are immediately distinct, and I didn't really have to change my vocal quality very much. So the next thing that I'll tweak is the pitch of my voice. If one character has a higher voice than another character, then it helps to differentiate them when they're in conversation. This can be globally, again, for the entire character's personality. Every time they speak, they've got a higher pitched voice every time they talk. Or it can be scene to scene. If the character's agitated or in high energy, I can pitch up to sort of help differentiate between who's speaking, if the characters have similar voices. In a similar fashion, the rate of speech. If one character talks more quickly than the other characters, they may have personality traits that lend them to talking more quickly, or they may have a personality that lends itself to talking more slowly. And those two disparate differences can lead to personality traits, and additionally, it can be used within scenes to give sort of a emotional energy to a scenes. If a character's agitated and is really upset and they need to talk fast, then they might talk quicker. Or in the same instance, they may be agitated and they may talk slower. So you can really tweak it as you will. And then the last thing that I'll adjusts on these sliders for character voices is the texture or vocal quality. And there's a whole range of ways you can think about this. And I put it sort of on a spectrum, and it can be a sort of breathy character voice or a really grounded and sort of earthy character voice, or maybe a silky character voice versus a gravelly character voice, or a light character voice versus a really heavy character voice. Each of those things helps to just give space and differentiate characters more. And so, in thinking of these as sliders, it helps me to both have just sort of general settings for each character and then adjust scene to scene if it's needed to give some space. And with each character, uh, once I've got those sliders sort of set up, I'll kind of assign myself a facial expression or a position around the microphone to help myself get into that character. So maybe one character might kind of talk like this and be just a little like this, whereas another character may have a sort of nasally, nerdy voice, and then there's another character that just really wants to bake some muffins. It may look really, really silly, which is one of the benefits of not having anybody stare at you when you're narrating, but it makes it easy if I have to get into each of those characters really quickly. To have those physical positions that I can pop to, at least for the major characters. And then in terms of keeping the voices consistent, so now I'm moving into narrating, and it's a 16-hour book, and you've got 20 different characters you're trying to juggle. How do you make sure that you're going back to the same voice every time they speak? As I'm reading the book, I'll record little voice memos in my phone, just as I'm going, making little MP3 sort of dossiers or portfolios. So every time a character description pops up, I'll just record. And then I've got little voice files where I've not only reinforced that character voice for myself, but I'm sort of gathering all the information about their personality in one place. And then as I'm recording, I'll leave what's called markers in my recording software on the audio files. So anytime a character speaks for the first time, I'll plop down a marker and I can go back to that point anytime they pop up again so that I know it's consistent with the first time that they spoke for the rest of the book. And at the end of the day, I'm still just one person, one voice narrating the whole book. Ultimately, you're not becoming these characters. The way that I like to think about it is I'm the person telling this story in the most engaging way possible. And in doing so, I'm doing my best to honor each character as honestly and faithfully as I possibly can, because that's what they deserve. And that doesn't mean that the listener is going to expect my voice to all of a sudden transform into something that's not me. We all know it's me voicing the 40-year-old single mom in this book, and I don't need to pretend that it's anything but that. We're just presenting this and letting the listener's imagination, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing, take the reins and fill in all the gaps for us. And the imagination does really, really compelling things in that regard. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about this or anything else related to voiceover or audiobooks, let me know down below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Till then, toodles.